It's evident today that corporations raise and spend huge amounts of money on the political campaigns of presidents and congressmen. These corporations also spend huge amounts of money hiring former government officials to lobby Congress to pass laws that mainly benefit their interests. If so, have we allowed entities other than people to monopolize government?
The Founding Fathers were very concerned about the use of political power to benefit special interest groups, what they call factions. Small segments of society that had their own selfish concerns that didn't relate to the benefit of others. So they wanted as much as possible to restrain the ability of the general government to engage in that kind of behavior.
The system that we have today of interventionism serves the interests of the lobbyists, and they represent the international corporations because they have influence. And they say what we need is lobbying reform to keep the lobbyists from lobbying. That is not the answer, because lobbying is just petitioning the government. We have a right to do that. What we have to do, there's two answers to that. One, if you had the right people in Washington, the right members of Congress who would not yield to the temptation of being influenced by money, the whole program would cease. They wouldn't have any more influence. But that doesn't seem to happen. The real solution is getting the government out of the business of being able to pass out favors, so there's no incentive for the businessman to come and lobby the member of Congress.
Have we allowed corporate power to influence the creation of laws that fail to benefit the people? Are we allowing corporations to reconfigure the laws of this nation to suit their purposes at the expense of real people?
Do you feel special interests have hijacked Congress?
I don't. No, I think they've got a valuable part to play because they are experts in their area and they can provide some good guidance for the congressmen who aren't specialists in these areas.
Lawyers will argue that indeed corporations are people. They will argue that they are even good corporate citizens. But is a corporation really a citizen? Or for that matter, even a person? And what about a multinational corporation? Is that even a citizen of the United States?
There's no doubt in my mind that the political apparatus of the United States government is much more beholden to the powerful lobbying interests, the companies that can write those big fat checks, campaign contributions and that sort of thing. You can see it every day. The politicians will give speeches, very good speeches in some cases, saying all the things that the voters want to hear. But then when it comes time to vote on an issue, they quite often will go directly opposite to what they said, and they will vote in favor of the positions that the corporations want and the lobbyists want.
Did the Founding Fathers write the Constitution for real flesh and blood people or for corporations, artificial entities that are creations of the state? If one suspects the Constitution was written with real people in mind, then is it fair to those real people that artificial people get to write and influence the passage of all manner of laws, and expect these laws to be binding upon those same real flesh and blood people?
Public officials have become less concerned with what people want or with what Americans, the common American, thinks. What's the solution? Well, what kind of a government is this? It's self-government. Right? Self-government is not a spectator sport. If people don't participate in it, either running for office themselves or becoming involved with political campaigns or becoming involved with public education on issues, well, then you're going to leave by default control in the hands of the small number of people who do those things. And the smaller that group becomes and the more they see that the general population is really disinterested or even impotent in political affairs, the more they will tend to think, well, we can run things our own way. We don't have to remain in touch with the people because they don't count.
Just as Marxism called for workers of the world to unite, a different totalitarian ideology calls for corporations of the world to unite. Not only unite with each other, consolidation, but unite with governments, with states. Thus, when corporations unite with the state, it is known as fascism. So, what is the difference between a socialist state and a fascist state?
If you go far enough to the right, you get fascism. If you go far enough to the left, you get Marxism.
Fascism develops when the state initiates the merger of corporate power with state power, as what happened in Nazi Germany and Mussolini's Italy. The key words being merge and power. Fascism is thus not a merger of the state and corporations per se. It's a merger of their power. Secondly, it's the merged power that governs, not either the state or the corporations per se. Today, however, with multinational corporations growing into entities, some larger than states, we have emerging a totally unprecedented form of fascism, what could be called corporate fascism.
Have you ever heard of corporate fascism? If so, what is it?
I'm not familiar with that term specifically. I could take a guess at it, where I assume that it reflects on the amount of money that's available for large corporations to support lobbying and have an influence on what laws are passed and not passed.
Under corporate fascism, corporations are so huge that they have the financial ability to initiate powerful lobbying influences over governments, even the Congress and presidency of the United States. Thus, even though such multinationals and the U.S. states are able to remain distinct, again, it's their merged power that increasingly supersedes the will of we the people.
Have you ever heard of corporate fascism? If so, what is it?
I've read about it on CNN. I don't know if I can actually define it. If I had to say, corporate fascism is probably just greed, corporate greed, and just hypocrisy.
To understand what socialism is, one must first understand what communism is. Communism is an economic system whereby the state owns the means of production. Means of production meaning capital. Capital meaning money, machinery, labor, land, and resources. Socialism is an economic system whereby the state owns the fruits of production. Fruits of production meaning revenues generated by the means. Revenues generated by the means is another way of saying taxes.
Extreme of socialism was the Soviet system, communism. So there was no pricing structure, and it's a failed system. It can't work because prices are so important.
So communism owns and confiscates the means and fruits of production, whereas socialism confiscates just the fruits of production in the form of excessive taxes. Socialist states in Europe, for instance, confiscate as much as 50% of the money citizens pay for retail products and services. This is the outrageous sales tax a socialist state demands.
We interfere a lot, but we allow prices to adjust in the marketplace for the most part. But when it comes to interest rates, the Federal Reserve is always deciding the central plans through the control of money and interest rates, how much money we should have in circulation, and should we shrink the money supply, expand the money supply. And that's a form of socialism, but it's only half of socialism because it's controlling only half of the transaction, and that's money. But it's very dangerous and leads to an authoritarian approach because it eventually breaks down, and I think that's what we're witnessing today.
Thus, a socialist state rapes the people mainly through excessive taxes. A fascist state rapes the people mainly through excessive debt. Both ultimately rape the people through taxes because debt causes inflation, a hidden tax. Debt causes inflation because the Federal Reserve System facilitates the conversion of government bonds, government IOUs, into Federal Reserve notes, what we use as a currency.
Well, the Federal Reserve, in its very nature, is contrary to a free market. The Federal Reserve is not only regulating, but it's manipulating the marketplace against the will of the people who are conducting the marketplace.
When this is done, the money supply is inflated. When the money supply is inflated, it becomes watered down or diluted. Just like stock, when a corporation authorizes and issues more stock, existing shareholders are diluted. When money is diluted, it has less purchasing power. When it has less purchasing power, prices rise because it takes more Federal Reserve notes to purchase a given product. When prices rise, it has the effect of a tax. Inflation is therefore a hidden tax.
If the government can create new money that it doesn't have to tax for, and especially if it can put off the ultimate payment of this into the future through the use of long-term bonds that are the backing for the fiat currency, then we have a government that is essentially out of control to some degree. It can make decisions that are not immediately going to subject the people to pressure.
Thus, corporate fascism uses debt, which generates the hidden tax of inflation, and cultural Marxism uses endless taxes to fund its socialist operations and expansion. Unfortunately, the constitutional republic envisioned by the founders is being undermined by both cultural Marxism and corporate fascism. And to blame our problems exclusively on either the left or the right, liberals or conservatives, Democrats or Republicans, is foolish. Again, both cultural Marxism, an ultra-liberal ideology, and corporate fascism are undermining the U.S. Constitution and destroying the republic envisioned by the founders.